Okay, so I'm going to be looking at this piece here today. This piece and this piece, lots of color correction, lots of contrast problems. Pretty much the common theme today is issues with contrast. So using too much contrast, using too little contrast, and using uneven contrast. This looks like it's a nighttime scene, a sunset scene. When we have sunset scenes or dusk or something like that in a forest, what we're looking at, let's find a reference. Sunset scene forest or sunset forest. I'll yield more results. Images. Okay. So we have all of this as pretty much the color palette that you're using here. Let me just put them side by side. And one of the bigger problems I'm seeing is that we're seeing some pretty good greens in this image. So here's an example of the exact scene you're painting. What's one thing that's really missing with all these trees here in the background, which are directly in front of the light source, the god of the image? The cast shadows are missing. And so we have lots of missing cast shadows. Missing cast shadows probably has led to the reason why the trees in the background feel like they're a focal point. This should feel like it's the focal point. Also, as a rule of, in the rule of thirds, in the Fibonacci, in the golden ratio, whatever you want to call it, this is not in the ideal spot. It needs to be, sorry, I was using my funny brush. Why are you on threshold? What is that? What the hell? What is happening? Why? What just happened to me? What is going on? Are you kidding me? Why are you guys sending me these weird index files? I don't know what to do with this file. I don't know what to do with it. Motherfucker. I don't know what to do with this file right now. I don't. My bad. One moment. No. Okay. Okay. So we're bringing that over here. It's now a JPEG. Everything is normal. The world has gone back to normal. Okay. So what we need to do is talk about the proper placement of this mushroom, its silhouette shape against a white background, seeing that if it's an interesting mushroom shape or not. So I'm going to show you a couple of reasons why some of these features aren't coming through properly. So the first and most important one is exposure levels. You've chosen a really bad time of day and really dark contrast. Why am I doing it like this? I'm sorry, I'm just a little out of focus today. I'm just gonna do it like that. And because you've chosen this time of day, it's this really important large object. Half of it is in too much shadow. This object is also is in too much light in certain areas. And this is all improper use of contrast. So here we have object number 1. No, let me just do that instead. And we have the background behind it. All right, so this is a mushroom house. You were experimenting with mushroom houses. Mushroom houses come in all shapes and sizes. You can also Google just interesting looking mushroom. Interesting mushroom. Oh God, we're gonna get lots of druggy. Okay, so let's take a look at all these cool shapes from mushrooms. There's this one. There is this funny looking one. There are these ones right here. All right, so you can see what I'm getting at. You had all the mushrooms to choose from. All of these mushrooms, and you chose a very, very cliched shape for a mushroom. So let's say we're sticking to this mushroom shape. You could have chosen a different gesture for the mushroom as well. So a new gesture could have been better to to make the mushroom also behave as a focal point. So something like this, a little bit of planks here and there, a spiral staircase leading to a balcony, which lead up to another staircase, and inside we have a couple windows and a couple of other windows over here. Maybe an extra little house over here for some logs, to put away some logs, or some kind of shed. So we did this, a lot of this talk back when we did the Witch's Hovel challenge. What I was talking about was testing out silhouette of the object that you're about to render. Testing it out, making sure that it feels interesting, it looks interesting. Maybe there are extra pieces of mushroom growing on the mushroom. So we have an interesting silhouette. So if I were to draw black over all this and test its silhouette, it would definitely look more interesting than a basic crosshair right over here, which is what you have. You had a basic shape with basic symmetry and a basic cross. I've talked to you guys a lot about this, it being very, very boring, especially for character design as well. You want to have the cross a lot. It's great to have intersections because they create focal points, especially around important areas. You want intersections, but you don't want perfect symmetry if you're trying to paint a cute, fantastic looking house. If the house is a mushroom, you've already crossed the line into fantasy. You might as well just go the distance and make it look a little bit more quirky, a little bit more charming. So this is part of the reason why the mushroom house is kind of off for me. Then there's the fact that its placement isn't ideal in the canvas. I'm just going to flatten it. I'm going to take it into liquify. I'm shortening the mushroom on purpose. This is because we need to zoom out. It's bad photography if we're not zooming out. And I'm going to give that mushroom that interesting looking shape. I don't want it to look like a young mushroom. I want it to look like someone's lived in here a long time. So giving it those little sags here and there might help it feel a little bit more interesting. Not so much that it loses its mushroom density, but just so it looks interesting again. This wooden staircase, I would probably make it sag just a little bit, just to show, like, not necessarily a great carpenter put it together, or a woodworker, someone who's a bit of an amateur kind of put their house together here, which is again adding to the charm. And the placement is going to be right here for the mushroom. So I'm going to try to get this to patch up a little. Sorry for the patchwork. Okay, so just these changes, just this change alone, this new framing that we're doing, has helped the painting along. So it's not dead in the center, because that's really bad photography. Again, we want it a little bit on the second half, leaning into the far half, leaning into the second half. So occupying one half of the painting, not smack dab center in the middle of that second half either. So imagine the painting being in two halves. We're not putting it in the center of either half. We're putting it a little bit in between both. More so one than the other. Not symmetrical. You never want to go for symmetrical in any opportunity to be symmetrical. So we did this. The painting isn't, the mushroom isn't here in between both. It's more on one than the other. And it's not in between both. And it's not here at equal distances. It's above one more than the other. So that means that if we go back to this painting, I'm going to lower it just a little bit. So it's not symmetrical by any definition of the term. It's not symmetrical in between both pieces, in the center of both pieces, in between all of these two halves, and in between this half. So in any way you divide the image or rotate it, it's not in the perfect center. And that's how you find a great position for a, let me just try to mess around a little bit more. For a plate. You don't have to use all that fancy schmancy Fibonacci stuff. You don't have to. It just can't be smack dab in the center of one half of the painting. Look at how empty all this feels. And I shrunk it just a little bit so it occupies more space width-wise, because it's a landscape, so I want to work width-wise. You gave me a vertical mushroom on a horizontal landscape. Use that horizontal landscape to kind of explore a little bit. And I very rarely see long mushrooms. I see short, stout mushroom. When you think mushroom, you think short, stout, wobbly. If it was a character, it would be a tanky character. You don't make it synonymous with tall or lanky, which I've yet to see. I mean, you can have fun with that if you wanted to, if you really wanted to. Make a tall character out of a mushroom, or the mushroom kind of silhouette, or the storyline of a mushroom. You know, I'm talking too much about mushrooms at this point, but all right. So I'm just cleaning up. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Can anyone explain in a word or two the changes I just made? I think chubby. Yeah, you think chubby. Istebrak, could you have the mushroom leaning forward? Would that be interesting? Yeah, by all means. Mess it up as much as you want. Give me some character in the silhouette of the mushroom. The more characteristics that it has, the more descriptions, the more lines of code in its form, the more interesting the mushroom will be. The more exceptions to its perfection. So if it's perfectly perfect, it's not going to be interesting at all. I have no story to tell about a perfect guy who has no problems in his life. Same thing goes for any kind of silhouette you're ever going to draw. Nothing is interesting about anything perfect. Give me something imperfect and flawed. So flaw is character. Write that back to me. Any kind of flaw is character. That's why we fall in love time and time again with villains, because they're so interesting. So this is just a little bit of talk about composition and characterization in a landscape to create mood and atmosphere. So that's one, let's just put that in its own little container and push it away. Contrast is the biggest issue here. Contrast is the main reason why I'm having a very difficult time deciding what's important anymore. What's important? So let's cast some shadows. Let's try that first. Flaw is character. Good job, boys and girls. So I'm just casting some shadows, hopefully casting them right. Ossie had a nightmare. Alright, so just casting some shadows on the grass. Sun is right there. We know where it is, so we have to cast shadows in this direction. Some of these cast shadows get on top of this log, which makes the log interesting as well. It's so close to the focal point. Okay, this blue right here, there's no blue in the sky nearby, is there? So there's no blue in the water. You're using realism. You're not using storybook physics. Storybook physics is cell shaded, but blended, but fuzzy, but a little bit of shadow, mostly cast shadow, not even cast shadow sometimes. That's storybook physics, all right? Like children's book physics. When we have a sunlight and some real form and lighting coming out and some realistic shadows and shapes of what are they called? Trees and silhouettes of trees. And we have different varieties of trees, and we have cast shadows on the lower half of every grass, but on the top half it's catching just a little bit of light. We're talking about physics, you know, real world physics, made to be a little bit more characterized and interesting, but definitely not storybook physics or children's book physics. What I'm doing is I'm just going to grayscale the water. It's just reflecting anything nearby. Some of the sunlight, though, might come in and make that water behave a little bit more interesting. So I might just do a little thing like that, just reflecting some of the nearby sunlight that's shining in through the relief in the trees. And then we've got the reflective shape of the trees. So if you were ready to reflect some blue, which is nowhere because it's a sunset, we don't have blue skies in a sunset, very rarely, and on specific conditions. But I'm just casting some texture characteristics. A texture is also in its reflectivity. Write that back to me, or write that down. A texture is, its characteristics are found in its reflectivity as well. So when something is matte and made of suede and felt, that's a texture characteristic. If something is non-reflective, that's suede, and that's a characteristic. If something is reflective, you have to remember to capture that reflectivity. So I'm going to get smudge tool on this one, scatter brush, and I'm just going to smudge at the reflections to further the texture of the water. The water's texture is reflective, so I'm furthering this texture. Again, it's also on the surface micro texture. It's not always about the micro texture, which just means the small little textures at the top, little bumps and bruises, but texture is reflectivity. A texture's characteristics, let me see what Tommy wrote, are also in its reflectivity as well. Exactly. Exactly. Good job, everyone. Congratulations. I'm half paying attention to the stream, half trying to convince my friend to join the community. I say that I'm really loving Istebrak. Changes to the space so far, though. Thank you, Periodical Pros. So then we have, this is why I'm avoiding contrast, is because I'm going to do one big sweeping motion to fix the contrast. So I'm just trying to make all the changes beforehand. Then we have the indoor lights. So we have like mood lighting or atmospheric or ambience or any secondary light source, anything like that. The world has to be dark enough for it to be visible. But sometimes, because of the characteristics of this particular piece, we're kind of pushing that a little bit. We're kind of pushing that. In the position, this is me shifting finally into fixing the texture. The position of the I'm just smudging. The position of the mushroom is silhouette. It's not half. Because just look at it. It's in a place where we're facing away from the light source. We're facing away from it. It might get some subsurface stuff down here, which I'm going to mess around with, but really it's in a silhouette, which was something you want to do, because you want to be able to have this dim light and this secondary light dress up the painting. You might even want to bring in some fireflies, which do come out at dusk and light up their cute little butts. So we have darken. And I'm just darkening the mushroom. Creating this glow. And I will bring in the amount of light that is coming through. Just like that. And the subsurface right here. Okay, so I would darken that a little bit more, but it's already so dark in certain areas. It's black in certain areas. So the contrast already was flawed in the fact that you had pure whites and pure blacks, and you can just tell if something has issues if you just grayscale it. Real issues. Objects in the foreground are sharing contrast levels as objects in the background. The focal point has blacks and whites completely hiding its information. When we have black and white wash over something, we don't have grays, and grays is where all the beautiful flesh of the object happens. The detail happens. So these are major fundamentals you're having issues with. Your contrast and your use of contrast and your attempt to color that contrast has led to muddy colors. And you've gotten away with the muddy color because it's sunset. But let's try to paint a daytime scene with the same mushroom, the same environment. Are you going to also use blacks and whites in a daytime scene? No. There's too much diffusion happening. There's too much bounce light. The grass is a reflector. The nearby trees on each other are reflectors. The floor of the forest, even if it's covered in leaves, is a reflector. Light is a reflector. So you can't have this level of blackness everywhere. You get away with it because it's the sunset. You get away with the muddy values because it's the sunset. But we're losing so much valuable information all along the mushroom's anatomy right here. Okay, so I'm trying to bring some of that mushroom's characteristics back, and then I probably want to create some The stem of the mushroom is also, it has a lot of surface texture. I'm just going to use some random invented bounce light nearby from something. And then I'm going to blend it away. Can't stay that sharp, it's in the shadowed region. Nothing is there to feed that level of sharpness. And the bounce light revealing it isn't strong enough to support this much. But still, that black is just way too strong. Okay, so this is my attempt at making some of this work. The light has shone through onto the other side of the mushroom, all the way past. Wherever the light, the sunlight gets to come through, that's where I'm going to just make some like roots happen of light. So right here, the light gets to come through. So we get warmer greens. Right here on the bridge, get a bit more of the light. This is a very strong light source here. The subsurface here, I'm still really bothered by how dark this mushroom has gotten. And it's a pretty translucent mushroom. Mushrooms aren't really that opaque. Let's see if it's even on Photoshop. What was that? Was that Facebook? Leave me alone. So what was I going to search up? Oh, mushroom subsurface scattering or mushroom and sunlight. So let's try to see if there's even a reference for something like that. Just keeps giving me 3D modeling stuff. Mushroom sunlight. Okay. So there's an example of some subsurface scattering. And that's a certain kind of mushroom that fans out. As for the stout short ones, that's some subsurface scattering down here. So that's a good reference for it. And this is all sunset stuff, so you can have a pretty bright painting if it's a sunset. Nobody told you had to paint it really dark. And it would be a very difficult thing for me to forgive if I was marking you or I was your teacher. Look at that subsurface scattering. Also kind of a daytime scene. You are getting blues. It's not fully sunset yet, but this is a great example. Yes, the lighting of a sunset scene might not be strong enough to provide subsurface scattering, but it can be if there's a beam going in the right direction in the right way. But it bothers me, and it would have ruined your marks if I was your teacher or your private teacher. I would have been very mad if I knew you didn't Google something like this. If you didn't try this kind of Google. Okay, so there's all this information answering all questions you might have. If you had issues rendering this painting, all you had to do was a quick Google and it would have filled in all of the gaps in your visual library. So I'm just taking a dodge tool on midtones and I'm just lightening that up a little bit. And now when I darken one side, I won't feel so bad about it. Because I had too much exposure. Do you see that level of white you had? Too much exposure. I'm just going to clean that up. Just like this. Okay, and then we've got these little pieces of grass which are on a hill, and the hill is right directly exposed to the sunlight. So actually I'm just going to get this. So all these little pieces that are relieved from a nearby cast shadow, I'm not sure what the cast shadow is on all this grass, but it's way too black. So I'm just going to get some sunlight on it. What you can do, which would be really interesting, is if you did a darken layer and just cast a shadow on all the flowers. But they have to be bright though. They have to start bright and then they eventually get the cast shadow on them. Right off of the mushroom house. So just like that, just sourcing right out of the mushroom house. Some flowers are kind of peeking through still. So we're explaining all these cast shadows. We're explaining the subsurface scattering. One more cast shadow needs to be addressed, which is the shrubbery in front of the house. Just casting a shadow here. But the position of the camera, which is a great position, again, you're not really trying to show a towering mushroom, so it's okay. I guess you get away with the fact that it's a pretty balanced horizon line, top and down. I would probably try to show how the trees might tower over it, just so we can use that. So maybe a bird's eye view would have been a little bit to show that it's cozy. Maybe to push that feeling across. Messed up, I covered the grass that I illuminated, so I'm just going to go back to the grass over here. Son of a bitch. Alright. Always looking at the navigator to review whether or not that's a good thing to do. So a lot of this is planning, and when you don't plan, you're making mistakes you're smart enough not to make. But you're making yourself look like you have less skill than you really do. Who does that to themselves? Who sabotages their own career? Who? Nobody. So this is you sabotaging yourself if you're not planning. Why do that to yourself? Right? Same deal. Why would you sabotage your own interview? Well, why would you sabotage your own painting? It takes just a couple minutes to research every aspect of the painting, just a couple minutes each. And I think your gallery's worth it. I think you're worth it. I think it's worth it to spend a little bit more time. Some of these grass pieces are a little bit catching some light, so I'm just gonna always looking at the navigator. Multiple personality disorders, they get you. You guys sabotage. Why would you do that? Don't sabotage yourself. You're worth it, you know. So these are just some of the changes I made to your mushroom house. Please sketch it first. That's what the Witch's Hovel assignment was supposed to be all about. And if you haven't seen that video and haven't seen all the beautiful submissions, please go to that video and check it out. I'm going to push this over into it's hard to decide. But it talks about basically how to plan. First and most important thing of a landscape is to decide where the horizon line is going to be. That's a big one. I'm just desaturating every area where there are shadows. And then the exact opposite, I'm saturating wherever there are lights. This bark is too red. Oops. You want to add some fireflies, go ahead. But let's take a look at the before and after now. Before, after. You see how you had one half of the, I could literally crop it and I wouldn't miss anything. There was nothing here. Just more information to fill in the gap, to fill in the landscape. Why do that? That's a little more short, lower on the canvas, feels less tall. And because of that, it looks more cozy and cute. We gave it a little bit of a limp, of a lean to one side. It's not a perfect mushroom, but it's okay. Because the character that chose the mushroom doesn't really care for flaws, and it finds beauty in everything. So to see how you're getting narratives just out of one weird little thing that you did to the mushroom. This mushroom feels like it belongs to a really snotty, rude, tall, kind of like one of those bitches in Jane Austen movies, Jane Austen books, who have like a bad attitude and they're skinny, tall, and have a bun all the time at the top of their head and no other hairstyle. So it feels like this belongs to the main character or protagonist, and this belongs to their natural enemy in the story. We have that used time and again. So that one show, those set of movies on Netflix, I suggest you watch them, by the way. They're amazing. If you're having breakfast and you don't know what to watch, watch all the Tinkerbell movies. I'm serious. Take some time to watch all the Tinkerbell movies, please. They're wonderful. The songs are so cute. I don't care what you have, what kind of like predisposed whatever you have to Disney movies. Those are so cute. And as concept artists or people who want to draw for children one day, who want to write for kids, you have to be able to enrich your... I want to write for kids one day. I have a personal story that I'm working on. And I love just looking through what's already been written, what kids love to watch, and just seeing these tropes repeat through every single friggin' movie. It's comforting a little bit, because you know you don't have to work too hard in your characterization. You just have to write a character that meets each trope. Then you'll be able to enrich your plot a little bit. You'll be able to find plot twists and plot movement according to each character and what they bring. And you find a lot of that in really like universal children's movies like Tinkerbell movies. They're really great, so please make sure you watch them. I recommend it. Okay, they're really wonderful. If you want to write for kids one day, if you want to draw for kids and stuff like that, and you're into that adorable kind of like the movie Epic, you're into all that cute forest, picking up their little knickknacks and making stuff out of human stuff, or recycling human small objects and making houses out of matchboxes or something like that. I fucking die for that stuff. I live for that. Dressing up animals, I go crazy for that stuff. I love drawing for it, writing for it. It's really inspirational for me. So if you are interested in that, you want to build your visual library a little bit better, just see how other concept artists have wrapped their head around all of these necessities and character tropes, characterization, landscapes, cinema, framing, camera work. All of that is just available on kids category in Netflix. So just go ahead and enrich your visual library. It's great entertainment too, you know, for breakfast or whatever. Now you know what I watch for breakfast. Okay, so this painting is throwing me off because you have all this contrast. Look, oh my god, you picked it all the way from up here. Is this supposed to be a jellyfish? If it's a jellyfish, oh, like, okay, let's go to Google. Jellyfish. Secret Life of Arrietty. Oh my god, that's my anthem. I love that movie. I just pause the frame sometimes and just look. I just stare at it. Okay, so let's see these mushrooms. I mean, mushrooms. Damn it. Come on, brain, catch up. These are jellyfish, and let's take a look. They're not light sources, so they don't have all these whites and no man's land values. No man's land value, if you're new to my channel, just means choosing values that are up here or down here. Black and white and black are not allowed in your painting unless you're painting a light source, either a flame or some kind of magical glowy thing. So what you've done here is you've told me it's a light source? What are you telling me exactly? You need to be able to just let go and bring that down. Bring that all the way down. Alright. So you probably remembered one picture of a jellyfish you saw a long time ago. And you're like, wow, that jellyfish really glows. So you thought maybe the next time you paint a jellyfish, it should also glow. No. No, it shouldn't glow. Okay. My gosh, your contrast was off the charts. Off the charts wrong. Okay. So we fixed that. That just burning white, that hot white. And I'm going to correct the head a little bit. It's a little bit too large. Felt like it was a young woman's body, like a baby's body or a preteen's body with double D's. Again, please stop painting these characters. Always measure the head size first. Make sure you have the right silhouette for the age group, and then go ahead and bring your double D's in. Everyone needs double D's nowadays. Says the girl who's got double D's all over her portfolio. Anyway. Alright, so see how big it was before. It was probably practically a bobblehead or a chibi. And now it kind of matches her age. By rule of thumb, women with double D's, their heads are typically the same size as their boobs. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. But just pay attention next time. Kind of don't look at ladies' boobs, please, but just look at their head and kind of just quickly look at their boobs. It's the same. Their tits are as big as their heads. I'm serious. That's kind of a good measure when you have a big pair of boobs and you're drawing a character and the head size is still bigger than the pair of boobs, something went wrong. If the shoulders are smaller than the pair of boobs. Typically, A cup is the same size as your shoulders. It's a small little boobie. But when the breasts are bigger than the shoulder size, this is pretty much the measurement or how you measure it. That's how you know you have like a C cup or a D cup or something bigger. Okay? Alright, just a quick little lesson for you guys. I hope it helps you kind of choose better silhouettes for your characters. And this goes back to how large something is, or how large something looks if we hide it for a good amount of time in the painting process. We just kind of let go of it, not look at it for a little while, and talk about some other stuff. Let me answer some questions. Let's see some questions. George, you were supposed to peek, not look. Peek! That's why we go to life drawing classes. When you see a bare pair of breasts and you kind of really measure with your measuring tool how large the breasts are compared to the head. If we're talking about like older people or women with larger breasts, it's the size of their head. Breasts can get that big. Breasts can get even bigger than the size of the head. It can be like 2 heads long and wide. But as soon as I talk about breasts, you guys lose focus. I think it was an attempt to slightly from above perspective. An attempt, definitely. But definitely it's not some kind of fisheye. That's the only time you would get a head size that is so large. It's bobble. So fisheye, or yeah, like fisheye lens, big head kind of deal. Something like this. Then that's when we get something like that. We get the shoulders above the neckline. We don't get the outline of the neck like we do here. Where are you? Just something like that. Is that something you were trying? At this point, yes, the breasts and everything would be much smaller. Again, neckline, not visible. Head is lower than the shoulder line. Head is lower than the shoulder line. This is head on. This is what you were going for. See the size of the shoulders, size of the breasts? Pretty much even. Very tiny little boobies. Okay, let's unveil. Bobblehead. Okay. So the neckline is above the shoulder line. This is not a worm's eye. And then we shrunk the size of the head, and there we go. Istebrak, why do beginners' textures always look like clay and advanced textures look soft and real? Because beginners like to think that the more work you do, the better your texture looks. Beginners like to think that the more you shrink your brush, the better your texture looks. It's the exact opposite. Textures are made by the illusion of the texture, not actually painting the texture. Micro texture for micro texture. Pixel for pixel. Square inch for square inch. We don't actually do that. What you do is you create the illusion of the texture. Use a stamp brush, blur it out a little bit, and it looks realistic because we're not actually rendering the texture. We're creating a trick of the eye. We're not actually bringing you detail through the texture. It's some kind of backwards way of rendering, and that's the only way you render a texture, backwards, like we do with hair, large to small. We don't actually paint in every hair strand. So these are just some changes that I would make for this. Large head. You're using lines around areas where you shouldn't use any lines. This has become a focal point, and you've filled it up with a nice little line for us. That's not good. So I don't want to talk anymore about boobs, but that line, you should get rid of it and replace it with an edge. It's as simple as just carrying this value all the way to the edge and starting the next nearest value and not blending them. I hope this helps. It's an anime eye, so you kind of get away with everything. The saturation everywhere should be brought down because you want to make her the most pink thing in the world. You don't want to just make it look like a big ice cream or a slushie. And when we do that, when we darken, and I'm just going to color correct, I'm going to get her peachy color and use that on everything. Or at least to shift this more to warm. So now that we've darkened a little bit, I'm going to just cool down the lower half. Cool down the background. Now we can make her glow the way you probably want her to, which is with a soft light, because everything is as dark as it needs to be in the background. And I'll show you, you can go even darker into the background. Burn midtones. If you want this jellyfish glow, subsurface scattering from nearby sunlight, underwater, you're gonna have to darken everything around her so that you can make her glow. If that's what you were going for, this like glow in the jellyfish. Okay, and then because jellyfish do kind of have all of this see-through skin, they do tend to catch some light. It's just this subsurface way. And you can bring us these, even if it's magical, even if it's bioluminescence, you can give us these tiny little strands all the way over here. But the amount of texture you have just all over the place over here has completely made my eye go straight for that jellyfish instead of actually go for where the eye needs to be, which is on the portrait. This is a portrait. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's just a skirt. This jellyfish is a skirt, but look at the choices you made with it. Before, after. You guys aren't painting environments right now. Nobody's painting environments. Everyone's just painting characters. But if you want to paint a character and illustrate them in this open environment, you're going to have to paint an environment first. The environment comes first, which is the dark value, the color, the surrounding colors, the atmosphere, the conditions that are around the character that either allow or not allow values to come through. I'm going to desaturate this even more, because it is not more important than her, which has the most saturation. This is as much as I can do right now to balance the colors and make her glow a little bit. When you want to put on a light show, you turn off all the lights. If you wanted a light show, it had to be a darker scene. Okay, so what we just saw was too much contrast. This is too little contrast. So what I need to do is separate the conditions and the texture of the sky from the rocks and what the rocks are doing with the light. Which isn't much because we're in the valley. We're not in the exposed areas. And this is inspired from, or this is actually directly inspired from the Titan's Graveyard challenge that we had a while ago. So the sky should do something different from the rocks. But right now the sky looks like it's made of rock. That's how we had a contrast problem. Don't confuse the sky as a texture. Write that back to me. The sky is not a texture. It's part of the light source. It's just empty air molecules carrying light through them. They don't behave like a rock does. Yes, it's sunset, but still, it needs to be treated like a light source, which it is. The big fireball is glowing in the sky. Okay. I really hate what Dodge Tool does. I don't appreciate it at all. Don't confuse the sky as a texture. When I say that, I mean don't make the sky behave like a rock. The sky is not a felt veil on everything. It is the glowing orbit of light that reveals all objects. The sky is part of that wonderful light environment that we always talk about, the background in a light environment, in a form study, in a portrait. The sky is part of all of that. And then we've got the fact that the sun, which is very, very strong, blooms over the edges of stuff. Kind of really hating what the edge tool is doing to these colors. I'm just going to desaturate. Let some white come through. Let all that sand belong to the earth. So right now what's happening is you have a bit too much of a yellow over everything. This peachy value, and again you've treated the sky as a texture because you made the sky's color have the exact same color as the sand, which made it very monochromatic. Then all this light is coming through this valley, but we don't have any cast shadows. Why? We should be getting some real relief over here. Maybe in between two valleys, two parts of the valley. Just something where part of this object is, where part of this object is getting some light shown on it. You're drawing him in the middle of a valley, so this part isn't getting any. There's a cast shadow. And it just continues through there. I'm gonna try to pull this off. God help me. Until I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The shadow of the valley of death. Oh God. Is this gonna work? It's just this whole section up should be in shadow. It should be in light. So there's that cast shadow. There's the rest of the Titan that is in shadow. There is that. And I'm just going to make everything glow. And all this stuff that is not directly exposed to the light should be warm, and anything outside of that should be cool. And the best way to cool down a sand scene is to just get your your desaturation, your SpongeBob, and just clean it up. So this part here is the most dark, is the most in shadow, so it doesn't get much. And because it's in a shadow, just like the windows of that mushroom house, we're getting some glow. Even if it's a tiny little worm glow, we're still getting a lot out of it. Like the glow in your phone. It means nothing when you're outside getting into your car. But in nighttime, it just blinds you. You just want to fucking chuck it across the house. Alright, so you just have to think about it like that. Please don't chuck your phones. I'm not paying for your phones if you break them. Okay. So this, even though that might not be that large a shadow and it's a dying creature, it would still glow a lot in this dark environment, this part of the shadow over here. And I'm just going to warm up anything that the light touches. And sometimes, only sometimes, we get these really, really hot, movements across the surface of sunlight across the surface of something. This is just me having fun. We like to have fun here. Oops, oops. Just these like really, really, really fun belts of saturation just across the whole fucking thing. When we get these shadows, and we get the mountain just literally glowing. Now we get the shadows cooled down significantly. But alas, I can't have that much fun today, so I have to dim it down again. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to desaturate at the base of all of this to show where the sand has caught some air, and I'm just going to bring in that fog. That fog should finally close off and connect the foreground with the background. And it's a very gray ass fog. Sorry about that, I don't know why I had to swear. Okay, always looking at the navigator. The saturation on this mountain is bothering me, so I'm going to just bring that down. And then I'm going to smudge at the fog. Some fog kind of likes to reach heights, and it works in pattern. Some of it likes to work like weird little vents, kind of like this constant vent of atmosphere coming through different windows, or maybe it's a magical source that's causing all of this. But this should bring in that last color that we need, which is just that grayscale, to finally give us the contrast that we're looking for. Feel free to try all the challenges. All the resource packs are available on my website, istebrak.com. The spelling of my name is right there on the channel. If you don't know how to spell it, I made it very easy, istebrak.com. Go to the community tab and just download your resource packs. Some of that green is going to shine through on top of the fog right here. Mother. So we get some of that green, it just gets right on the fog. Ooh la la. Oh my gosh, that's so pretty. Just like that. Wait a second. Yeah, just like that. And because that green is both a color and a magnitude, we let that fog get a little bit of extra light on it. And this is how we're breaking that monochromatic thing that you had going on here. You had a bit too much of that. And all the fog over here in this distant area is more of a warm gray, or like a white, pearly white. And it's just getting caught by all the light. But we can't just let it sit like that. We have to make an edge happen. So feel free to ask some questions now. I will look at them in a second. But we're using these fogs to separate these surfaces from each other. By the way, everyone, I don't give out paint overs anymore. My copies just get deleted. So, yeah, that's it. Should I get rid of the line art when we color? Should we get rid of all the line art when we color? Like that boob line Istebrak mentioned. When you color, when you start rendering, when you grayscale, all of that should be like, you know, should consider the fact that you're now no longer needing the line because you moved into an edge. The edge should give you what the line gave you and more. You don't need to go back to that to your side hoe. You don't need to go back to your side chick. You have everything. She gives you everything, the edge. Okay? So So just remember that. You don't need, when you start grayscaling, when you color, when you go like straight into bringing in shades, as soon as you start shading something, that's when you know it's time to let go of that line. Adios, line. See you later. I want a committed relationship. I don't want to play games anymore. I want marriage. I want kids. That's what you should say to the line. Before, after. So we brought in more daylight. I would completely whiten that background even more because you already have such a high level of beige everywhere. And what you were painting before was a night scene, but you didn't have night scene glow. So I would just grayscale it just a little bit. It's not a full grayscale, and it's not where you had it, which was way too saturated. So grayscale where you had it, what I'm doing. Do you see that? You just had too much beige. It was just too much. So before, you had all this light in the background, like it was some sort of magical thing, but you didn't have like this crazy glow to this guy, which you should have if you wanted it to be all about this dude. And this would have been just all about him, and that would have been that. End of story. And then you just needed to darken the background. But if you were going to have all of this white in the background in the sky, we need to see the sky color separated, not treated as a texture. You treated it like it was some sort of fabric hung and veiled over everything. So now we have a separation between the depths, but we have something to unify them, which is the fog. And any kind of sand that's just become airborne. Doesn't have to be fog. Istebrak, when we're using dark and unsaturated and saturated colors, like in a lower right corner color square. Lower right corner of the color square. When we're using, do you mean when do we use those colors? These? When you have like some kind of subsurface scattering, usually the values in a subsurface scattering that do get saturated, let's say it's a red dress and it's been caught in some shadow. This is the subsurface scattering color. This is that shadow color of the red. That's when you can saturate, when the fabric itself is saturated and you still have to cool it down anyways. So this is when you need dark colors, dark deep pigments. That's what gets saturated. But you still need lines for sketching. Of course, you still need lines. When I say time for a committed relationship, when you commit to a painting, you drop the lines. The lines helped you like kind of practice. It was like a startup, like a beginner relationship, but then you moved into your, committed long-term relationship with edges and values and all of that business. So we use our lines to help us plan our painting, decide on major composition, perspective, character design, all of that stuff that we need to do in the time. We can't wait for a render to do it for us. We can't wait through a render to basically decide this character is going to have a skirt or not. We're not going to render each possibility. We're going to sketch it. Rough lines, that's what we use. So they're good for that. They're not good for rendering. They do not carry or read. It is an illusion. Earlier you mentioned children's book look without proper physics. What would be the goals to focus on for a good storybook look? Something in between. Saturated colors, definitely. Primary colors, definitely. You want to give children colorful books. They have like zero attention span, a negative attention span actually. So you want to maintain their attention and give them something interesting to look at. I don't care what they said. I always judged a book by its cover. There was that one book as kids we read, that rainbow colored goldfish. I just loved everything about that book because the sparkle and the shiny paint they used on the rainbow fish, it was just so beautiful. That's what makes me remember that book among all the hundreds of other stupid books they read to us as kids. So that's something I really recommend, is high saturation. As for physics, you don't really need sharp cast shadows and subsurface scattering. You do need a general idea of basic form study, geometric form study, understanding, really basic denominator shape, understanding of edges, and radial shading. Really, just if you're drawing a big fluffy yellow monster, you want to give him shadows where he's supposed to have shadows if he's stuck in the air. Kids also really like realistic stuff, believe it or not. They're kind of smart. They have zero negative attention span, but they're very smart. They know when something looks like a photograph, when something looks cool. They go, wow. We'd actually did a project like this in my art class a long time ago. We were drawing stuff for children, and we went to the kindergarten class, showed them our projects, and read them our stories, and the stuff they responded to was the most well-rendered like parts of the backgrounds that we drew. They never responded to stuff that was minimalist, like Samurai Jack drawings, which is the stuff I did. I really liked Samurai Jack. I love the backgrounds in Samurai Jack, so I went for that. And they didn't respond to that. They responded to stuff that was realistic with beautiful fisheye lens and other stuff, and they loved that stuff. So that's something I have to recommend. Datelines get married to Edge. Exactly. Datelines get married to edges, not Dateline. That's a whole other ball game. Do I have to join Facebook when I send you a painting for critique? You don't go anywhere near anything that is not a community. You just go to the community. That's it. Go to the community. You join this to get, to join. You join, and then you read the rules, and then you submit your stuff. Please make sure you read the rules. We're very, very strict. My mods and I have been very, very strict. Please don't break the rules. If you like today's class and you want to stick around for more, I'm going to be uploading today's recording. But if you want to join the community challenges from the past, or the one that was running just recently, I'll push it into the past soon, into the past list, you can just download them here. If you want some of my brushes that I've used a lot of my smudge brushes and blocking brushes. Those are the brushes I use a lot. They're available here. And I want to do one last really, really important update, which is Portrait Studio. The final look of Portrait Studio has been decided. The update is coming up. We're about like 60% completed. We just have to plug in some final little details, more functions. Sorry, I'm just getting my my USB stick. So the functions, the blend shapes, the enlarging and decreasing of the nose, all that business. So Portrait Studio demo, fantastic, play. If you currently have Portrait Studio, you can use the, you will be getting this update. If you don't have Portrait Studio, you're going to have to pay for this update, which is going to raise the price of it. I know right now it's pretty pricey where it is right now, but it's going to get more pricey if you're going to wait till the update to get it. This update means that it's going to all the people who currently own Portrait Studio. You just have to run your launcher and you'll get the update, no charge. It's just like a one-time buy and you get everything you need. But this is how the basic functions are going to look. We're going to be adding a lot more. I'm going to be updating you. The more demos I get, the more I give you, but you're going to have more lighting controls, more indirect lighting controls, which is a big deal. You get to control ambient lighting, diffuse lighting, all the stuff that you would want, basically. Any conditions that you apply to a core shadow, you're going to have control over in Portrait Studio. You're going to have the control over one male model, one female model, their features, their head sizes, their nose, everything is customizable. Posing is going to be delayed just a little bit just after this update because we keep doing these overhaul updates that perfect just the basic user interface. We want to make it more user friendly. It's also going to have Portrait Studio, the full version is going to have Form Studio in it, which is something I showed you guys a while ago, which is just about shapes, just for form studies. Those who want to do form studies will be able to have a studio just for that, deciding on their shapes. You can scatter shapes across a surface, choose where your light source is going to be, and then it'll just cast the light for you and you can study it. So you're going to have that attached to Portrait Studio. You're going to get that update. We will be selling Form Studio separately for a much less price as well, but for those who currently own Portrait Studio, you will be getting everything. Everything will be given to you. So these are just some of the basic stuff. File handling is going to be a little bit more optimized and efficient. It won't just be save states. It'll be files you can share with each other. So it'll be like a file type. You're going to have a lot more options with performance, so it won't be so taxing on your computer. We're working with up-to-date or kind of like cutting edge. We're really working with one particular lighting I guess like a lighting developer with Unity, and we're just waiting on his developments just so we can apply and use all of his lighting, like all his lighting technology that he designed just for Unity. We're waiting for that as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening. I promised you guys an update. We're definitely working on it. But for just as a warning, I always do this warning. I always tell you guys the price does go up. If you're having trouble buying it now, you'll have trouble buying it after the update comes out. It'll have way more features. It'll be a heavier program. If you currently want to own Portrait Studio but can't afford the full price, please message me on Facebook for a discounted price. So just explain why you can't afford it, if you're a student, etc., and I'll be able to sell it to you for a much smaller price. That's it for today. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a great week, guys. Bye.